Dismantling Colonial Myths, Palestine, Algeria, and the Unraveling of the Settler Project. Many independent analysts struggle to understand why the U.S. establishment is unwilling to apply the universalism of human rights to the people of Palestine. The history of settler colonies and pioneers goes back many centuries in European and U.S. history. The 19th century concept of pioneering evokes images of the wild frontier. For the US in particular, this period of time is very much associated with the idea of a new frontier, one where pioneers would move into areas largely empty of any people. In this telling of the myth-making of US identity, the chosen peoples would turn an area of desolation into paradise. This city on the hill, a narrative defines American exceptionalism and nationalism to this day. This is a foundational myth of the United States' national identity. What it omits is how this transformation was achieved by expropriating the land of Native Americans and building much of the land on the back of slavery. When applying the same formula to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it is seen in similar terms. The land of Palestine is described as being turned from desolation into a new, thriving green oasis. What this narrative ignores is how land was either bought from absentee landlords or taken by brute force. This formula also extends to other Western countries like France. In 1830, the French invasion of Algeria did not begin as a colonial settler enterprise but as an imperial invasion launched under a flimsy pretext. By the time of the 1871 Mokrani Revolt, the imperial project had evolved into a civilizational project. The French first seized 450,000 hectares of tribal land as punishment, and a further 451,000 hectares were bought by settlers for small sums by 1908. By 1936, 40% of land possessed by indigenous people was concentrated in the hands of a small minority of mostly French landowners. Similar to Palestine, Algeria was seen as an extension of the French state, a distant land where the dominant French saw the local Algerians as backward and undeserving of the gifts they were given by fate. The British colonial project took a different approach. Rather than having one version like the French or Americans, they took several approaches. In India, the British approach was to prevent settlers and settlements in new colonies. The American War of Independence traumatized Britain's fast-emerging imperial establishment, seen as a warning about how dangerous it was to allow the creation of a settler populace that could wage war against the home country. They created particular restrictions that British subjects living in India would eventually have to return home. They took a different approach in Australia, Kenya, and New Zealand, which were seen again more as settler-colonizer enterprises. This meant that the land was seen as empty and open to future settlers. The era between World War I and World War II was marked by the creation of the mandate system, which meant for the Palestinian people they were essentially written out of existence by the British. Looking at the settler colonial project in context, you can understand why the US's traditional post-World War II identity sees Israel as an extension of these concepts. This is why Palestinian humanity is dismissed, whereas the Israeli identity is seen as an outpost of Western civilization. Tragically, this means that the Palestinian people were always going to be seen as irrelevant unless something seismic shifted in the world. The 7th of October, 2023 has become that seismic shift. The combination of the advent of social media, leading to the weakening of traditional media guardians, the truth has managed to break through. This has happened just as the global center of power has shifted. In the new multipolar world, countries like China and India do not subscribe to the Western colonial project. What does this all mean for the future? Globally, it is difficult to say, but we know through history that new powers will bring their own version of a nationalist project. For the people of Palestine, this means that the world can finally see the inconsistency between the rules-based order and reality. Nobody can deny the tragedy and cleansing of the areas of occupied Palestine anymore. It also means that, for the first time in centuries, the tried and tested colonial project formula is being unraveled. For the Palestinians, this does of course come at great cost. They have paid the price of dispossession, death, and tragedy in the form of the Nakba. In the form of the 1948 partition and the subsequent wars, they have seen their land ethnically cleansed and been forced to live in a form of reservations, similar to what the people of North America and South Africa experienced. The Palestinians were also witnessing, as a consequence of the Abraham Accords, Israel on the verge of normalizing relations with countries like Saudi Arabia. Despite of all this, they have shown incredible courage and resilience when faced by overwhelming odds and the military power of Israel, with the full support of the United States. There is perhaps a lesson for the USA and for the Western world order. It shows the limits of their power and ability to project ideas like the settler colony onto the world. Perhaps that is the one small bit of consolation in a time of great tragedy.